Hey everyone. So, as you guys may recall from class, it is always my firm belief that everyone deserves a review before a quiz and a test. So, this is going to be the review for the first quiz in Aerospace 2. So, some of the things we talked about different types of engineers and what they have done. So, I would highly recommend you guys study on that. We determined that an aerospace engineer can do a multitude of things, and his focus can include spacecraft, aircraft, but it can also include simple vehicles such as automobiles and bicycles and anything like that. So when it comes to designing aircraft, you're going to have to understand that an aerospace engineer's primary job, even though his focus can be a wide variety of things in aviation, you should understand that an aerospace engineer is not restricted in any capacity. He could potentially work on engines or structure or aerodynamics. When it comes to designing an aircraft or a spacecraft, when it comes to aircraft performance, you will have to understand that um, if you have a aircraft, if you decide to do a design change, for example, change the wings from little wings to big wings, it would affect performance in another area. It could change aerodynamics, it could change what type of avionics. So everything we do in aviation is a particular balance. When it comes to spacecraft throughout history, we've had many spacecraft launches, from the Apollo program to SpaceX of today. But the majority of all spacecrafts that have shot into our atmosphere, the majority of them do not return to the surface of the Earth. Fairings and such will actually burn up in the atmosphere. When designing a spacecraft, there are many what we would call design constraints. You need to understand, as technology evolves, that the design constraints for modern spacecraft can change. They're going to be different than what they were 50 years ago, because we have new technologies. We have GPS, for example. So aviation in the aerospace industry is constantly evolving. So speaking of spacecraft and aircraft, we're going to talk about who has designed them and developed them over the years. There have been developments by the government, which would be a good example would be NASA. The military has also been very forward in aviation, such as attack aircraft, cargo aircraft. You have private civilian companies such as my old company, Boeing. We design many different products for different needs and consumers all throughout the world. Now, one of the biggest things this test is going to focus on is the types of engineers that are in aviation. The first one we're going to talk about is aerodynamics. That engineer can do two things. He can study how motion through a fluid affects both the vehicle and the fluid, because if you recall, air is a gas, and it is closely related to a fluid, so they can study. Not only can they study the effects on the air and fluid. They can study specific forces and how they are acting on that particular aircraft, such as lift and drag. The next type of engineer we're going to talk about is the type of engineer that studies electronics and electrical systems. So, the best way to think of electronics is to think of your radios. We call that type of engineering avionics. Electronics and avionics are closely related, so I want you to remember that. The last type of engineer we're going to talk about for this lesson is we're going to talk about, so we've talked about aerodynamics and lift, and we've talked about the electronics, but we're going to talk about what actually makes the aircraft go, or what propels it through the air. And the person you want to look for in that one is the propulsion engineer. Think of propellant, think of propelling something, think of propulsion. He is the guy who deals with the engines. I hope that this helps you guys out. Good luck.